Hello friends, at the end of May 2025 we rode the North Coast 500 in Scotland with our GS. In our 9-part series we show you unique landscapes, wonderful single tracks and great sights. As always, you can find the GPX tracks to follow in the comments below. Let's start! By way of introduction, a few words about how exactly this tour came about. On a motorbike tour with friends in the Sauerland, the idea suddenly popped up to go to Scotland by motorbike. The landscape, roads and sights are said to be fantastic. Spoiler, they are. As is often the case, the enthusiasts lost themselves over time and we were left behind. Now things were getting serious. We quickly realized that we would book the convenient ferry connection from Amsterdam to Newcastle. We wanted to save ourselves long motorway journeys and 2 extra nights in the middle of nowhere. When planning our trip on the notebook, we quickly came across the North Coast 500, a holiday route covering 830 kilometers along the north coast of Scotland and known as Scotland's Route 66. It begins and ends in Inverness, which means that this city has already been set. The route leads through historic counties, past many well signposted sites on poor but beautiful roads around the coast of Scotland. Many motorcyclists ride anti-clockwise, but we tried it the other way around. The advantage of the NC500 is also that it predetermines the towns where hotels need to be booked. Scottish hotels are not only expensive but also need to be booked early. This now also applies to bed and breakfasts, which at £120 are no longer really cheap. Booking.com was really a great help here. The further you get into the remote north of Scotland, the fewer hotels and restaurants there are. That's why we favored good hotels with restaurants where you won't spoil your stomach. Anyone who knows the Scots' passion for greasy food will know what I mean. It's not for nothing that the deep-fried Mars bar was invented in Scotland. Once we had booked an overnight stay every 250 to 300 kilometers, we got down to the rough planning. We researched special sites on the internet that we would probably pass by. We then used the Kalimoto app for the detailed planning and we were not disappointed later in Scotland. As a backup, we also exported the GPX data to Google Maps, you never know. Finally, we took care of the formalities such as passport, electronic entry permit ETA, drone license and registration for Great Britain and so on. We have included a small checklist in the description below, as a detailed look at the subject would go beyond the scope of this video. We ended up planning the following route. We would take the motorway from Dortmund to the ferry near Amsterdam. After a 16-hour crossing, we would land in Newcastle and make our way to Inverness via Edinburgh and Oban. From here we follow the NC500 via Plockton and the Isle of Skye along the coast to the northernmost point of Great Britain in Dunnet. The return journey takes us back via Inverness and Edinburgh to the ferry in Newcastle. So, enough of the introductory words, let's get started with the first day of our Scotland tour. Thursday, May 22, 2025 at 9:30 am, departure from Dortmund in the direction of Amsterdam. It's important to note that the UK is 1 hour behind. This means that it is 9:30 in Dortmund and 8:30 in London. You will always see the adjusted local time in our video. Shortly after setting off, we are greeted with what we can expect in Scotland. No, not traffic jams, but rain, lots of rain. The rain gear becomes our constant companion. We've spared you the boring drive along the highway to the ferry port for once. But before we board the ship in IJmuiden, we want to take another look at Haarlem near Amsterdam and have something to eat. You can safely forget our meal, but the small town is very beautiful and well worth a longer visit. The medieval city with its cobblestone street and typical gabled houses was once an important trading port on the North Sea. The fifth largest city in the Netherlands is known for its tulip fields and picturesque courtyards. Unfortunately, there is an enthusiasm for one-way streets here, which meant that we drove past some of the sites several times. It was also not easy to find a parking space that was reasonably legal. We should arrive at the terminal at least 1 hour before the ferry departs. Now it's time and we have to drive from Haarlem to IJmuiden, where we have to show our passports to the DFDS shipping company at check-in. In return, we receive our boarding cards. It's good to have completed all the formalities online beforehand. Important, the actual custom control takes place the next morning in the UK. After we had shown our passports and the shipping company had checked our details online, we were allowed to drive quickly onto deck 4 of the ferry in a group of motorcyclists. The metal ramps could get slippery in wet conditions, but of course we had no problems in the sunshine. There were enough straps hanging on the side of the boat so that we were able to secure the motorcycle with 2 straps, at the front on the forks and at the back over the seat. The shipping company has the following in mind. Park the motorcycle on the side stand. Engage first gear. Do not engage the steering wheel lock and tighten the handbrake lever with a Velcro strap, for example. We also put our rain gear under the belt to protect the seat. You should also bear in mind that the parking deck is locked when you're on sea, so you shouldn't have forgotten anything. The ferry slowly departed on time at 5:30 p.m. and we were able to enjoy a beautiful view of the coast from the deck, even if we were quickly driven back inside by the low temperatures. We were convinced that you should book a cabin for the 16-hour crossing, although there were also some hard-boiled passengers who had probably spent the night in armchairs. Given the high prices on board, it is better to book dinner and breakfast in advance. Both were delicious and plentiful. However, if you have a sensitive stomach, you won't get anything out of it if you have forgotten your seasickness medicine. Anyone who thinks that such a large ship doesn't get moving is very much mistaken. Before entering the harbor, you should secure a space at the doors to the parking deck early, which only opens about 15 minutes before arrival. If you take a more relaxed approach, you have to be prepared for the mob of bikers driving around you while you are still undoing your belts. Welcome to England, not yet Scotland. After the swift and smooth passport control, we just stop before the sign asking us to turn left. And of course, how could it be otherwise? I first turn right out of the harbour area. The traffic circles will also be a challenge at first. When do you signal which lane do I drive in if I don't want to drive out again immediately? Oh, it'll be fine. On day 2 of our motorcycle tour, we want to ride along small roads from Newcastle in England to Edinburgh, the Scottish capital. We have also planned a detour to Alnwick Castle. The castle was the backdrop for famous films such as Robin Hood and Harry Potter. We drive through the outskirts of Newcastle upon Tyne, which is the full name of the city. Typical English suburban architecture awaits us. Newcastle is the northernmost major city in England, and it is still over 200 kilometers to Scotland. For a long time, shipbuilding and coal mining were the most important industries. The expression "carry coals to Newcastle" refers to this, and means doing something pointless. Newcastle has produced great artists, Mark Knopfler, Sting, Eric Burdon and Brian Johnson, to name but a few. The city is worth a visit in its own rights, even if we only use it as a starting point for our Scotland tour. We have linked an interesting travel report above. There are various speed limits on the roads in the form of street labels, traffic signs and so on. Here we are approaching a school and are allowed to drive a maximum of 20 miles or 32 kilometers per hour. Our journey continues through the quiet town of Walton with a population of around 400 in the province of Northumberland. We especially notice the Barefoot Arms, a hotel with an attached restaurant in the typical style of the area. Unfortunately, it is still a little early for a break, so we continue on. Oops, didn't pay attention and got lost. Never mind, it won't be the last time that happens to us. The stone cross we just passed is on the National Memorial List and is a war memorial to the local fallen from the First World War. The few houses are in the small village of Netherwhitten, which was founded in 1698. You can't help but think of English series such as All Creatures Great and Small and almost wait for James Herriot to turn the corner. After Netherwhitten, we experience something quite rare, really good tarmac. It has to be said that the normally poor roads are not only noticeable when driving. We had new tires fitted at the front and rear before the tour. On our return, we discovered that the tires were burned to the limit after 3,200 kilometers. Other bikers we met on the road reported similar experiences. So, enough of the good tarmac before we get too used to it. We now drive over one of the typical cattle grids in the ground. These are an obstacle for animals as they can't find a firm footing on them. The grids are intended to prevent the animals from leaving the grazing areas via the road. Motorbikes should drive over the grids quickly and in a straight line. Cattle grids are also always a sign that animals are likely to be on the road from now on. Enjoy the beautiful vast landscape of Northumberland National Park with us. Northumberland is the least populated county in England, as you can clearly see here. Northumberland's proximity to Scotland meant that it was frequently involved in armed conflicts between the English and Scots. But Northumberland was not only the place where battles were fought and heroes were born, it was also the cradle of Christianity in England. The national park, through which we are currently driving, extends over an area of more than 1,000 square kilometers and covers a quarter of the county. Once again, the road signs now near Rothbury give us a hint of what to expect on the single-track roads in Scotland. It feels like there's a traffic sign for every traffic situation in the UK. That's true creativity. On the way to Alnwick, we follow a fast hearse whose driver is in a hurry to deliver his customer. At least we don't have to worry about onward transport in the event of an accident. Despite the dead animal on the camera lens, you may be able to see that we have now arrived in Alnwick, which is particularly famous for the castle of the same name and the neighboring garden. Alnwick itself has a lot of medieval architecture, but is already very much orientated towards tourism. At the playhouse we turn off towards the castle and all the visitor car parks where you can park for a moderate £3.50 a day. However, this low price level does not apply everywhere, as you will see in a moment. We ponder a little about where exactly we'll park the motorbike. This gives us a glimpse of the castle. Unfortunately, we can't offer you a view of the castle because we weren't prepared to pay nearly €50 for admission. Nevertheless, we have spared no expense or effort to provide the Harry Potter or Robin Hood fans among you with beautiful shots of the castle. The second largest aristocratic residence in England was first mentioned in documents at the end of the 11th century. The castle has been the backdrop for numerous films such as Robin Hood and Harry Potter. If you want, you can take a free broomstick training course here to improve your cornering, maneuvering, acceleration and braking skills for the next Quidditch match. After our short detour to Alnwick Castle, we now continue through a nature reserve near Edinburgh with mainly farmland, moorland and woodland. Again and again the paths lead along hedges and dry stone walls that border the fields. The weather is fantastic and we have no idea how quickly the weather conditions in Scotland can and will change. It's not for nothing that the Scots call it 4 seasons in one day. We seem to have just caught the summer now. We approach the parish of Edinburgh in the valley of the Edinburgh Burn, a tributary of the River Aln. The earliest records of human settlement in the parish are finds of flintstones from the Neolithic or Bronze Age. We are talking about a time 4,000 years before Christ. Whereas in the 19th century there were still around 2,000 people living in the village, today there are only around 100, most of whom commute to work in Alnwick or Newcastle. In 1972, the village and much of the surrounding land was declared a conservation area. A number of the existing buildings and other features in the village are listed and all mature trees are protected in Edinburgh. For many people, the area is considered an ideal place for retirement, but we want to go further. Even though Kent is the county with the most accidents in the UK, death also lurks on the streets of Northumberland, at least for unsuspecting pedestrians who can't see who is running them over as they are walking on the left-hand side of the road. But as she has headphones on, in this case, at least she would die with a nice song in her ear. The final enemy, however, are not pedestrians but buses that come towards you on the narrow streets. We are now greeted by Chillingham, a small village with fewer than 100 inhabitants. The village is famous for its herd of around 90 wild cattle, which have been living absolute inbreeding for at least 300 years. Oh well. Secondly, there is a 700-year-old castle here that is said to be haunted. Presumably not on this sunny afternoon. Its gardens and extensive park are open to the public, so let's just drive in. Chillingham Castle lies in the middle of a large park, which has been surrounded by a wall since the 13th century. An Italian Renaissance garden and an English landscape garden were laid out over the course of time. The present castle was extended in the 14th century to form a square complex with 4 corner towers, similar to a fort. In the centuries that followed, the castle was repeatedly rebuilt and extended. After the site was used as barracks during the Second World War, the buildings fell into disrepair. The castle has only been renovated piece by piece since 1981. Today it houses a castle museum complete with weapons collection, torture chamber and dungeon. Various castle ghosts are also said to be part of the inventory. For example, the Blue Boy, whose agonizing and fearful screams can be heard at midnight. Unfortunately, we don't have time to hunt ghosts today. By the way, if you're wondering why there are so many cars parked right in front of the castle, at all attractions in the UK, people with disabilities are always allowed to park right at the front. We don't really know how they get into the vaulted cellars or onto the battlements. So far we've completed half of the today's stage and now we have to speed up. Okay, admittedly, it doesn't look like accelerating on these narrow bridges and roads. Our GS is probably a little overloaded with 2 people and full panniers, but we don't come close to the 2 tons that were permitted on this bridge. We are a few kilometers past Chillingham near Chatham. Despite the single-track roads, the ways here are very relaxed for bikers. Every now and then you come across other vehicles or even horse riders, but the motorbike doesn't disturb her. We are traveling through the Millfield Plain, a fairly flat, fertile area. This used to be a huge lake that disappeared in 8000 before Christ, leaving behind fertile land. The now well-developed road leads us to the tranquil village of Dortmund. The village was described as follows in 1734. Remarkable for its size, the wickedness of its houses, and its low situation, and perhaps for the greatest number of geese in its neighborhood. We can't say anything about the houses, and we didn't see any geese. We are finally getting much closer to Scotland. Tourists surprise us in the middle of nowhere. Why? Because we are approaching the Union Chain Bridge, which separates England from Scotland. The chain bridge was built in the 19th century and is the oldest suspension bridge still in use for road traffic. We have waited dutifully until we are allowed to cross the bridge over the River Tweed, which forms the border between England and Scotland. So we leave the English county of Northumberland in the direction of the Scottish county of Berwickshire. Berwickshire is one of 32 local authorities in Scotland, collectively known as the Scottish Border. Until the union between England and Scotland in 1707, Scotland was a separate state. Only since 1998, Scotland had an independent parliament with decision-making powers over some areas that were transferred to it by the British Parliament in London. The 131 members of parliament are authorized to pass laws and in some cases set tax rates. All Scots aged 16 and over are entitled to vote, so they determine the parliament and therefore also the government. The First Minister and his cabinet reside in Edinburgh, the capital of Scotland. After crossing the border, we drive relaxed along typical stone walls, and suddenly a fully equipped FIA Rally 2 vehicle comes towards us. The FIA is the International Automobile Federation, which issues rules for motorsport events. So, it's not the village youth driving past us, but Callum Atkinson from Inverness with start number 66. So we're part of the Jim Clark Rally, which is held on public roads, but more on that later. After forgetting the strange encounter, was there a barrier that we had overlooked? Nope. We follow the stone walls at Edinburgh Castle until, yes, we've missed the actual path again. Anyway, we turn around and enjoy the castle wall a second time. The castle itself, as well as the gateway, are listed as Category A monuments in their own right. Unfortunately, it is already after 4 p.m. and so we have to skip the beautiful castle and the fantastic landscaped gardens. This time we see a marshal, but there is no sign of a barrier. Nobody jumps onto the road, waving wildly and trying to stop us from continuing. Mind you, an official motorsport event is taking place here where you can also earn BRC points. We feel a little uncomfortable, but other vehicles also come towards us. Sometimes even pedestrians. Okay, the hay bales at the side of the road suggest that higher speeds are also reached here. However, we assume that this is not a real race, but just a training run. A mistake. This fort looks a little uncomfortable, but it's already too late. We step on the gas and negotiate the slippery water passage. We still assume that this is a preparation phase for a competition, as we are again met by locals in their vehicles. It's only when we look up the details again at home that we realize we've entered the actual competition that day. All roads were formerly closed. Vehicles and pedestrians had no business here. We behaved very recklessly and it was really not safe to drive here. Please don't imitate this, and if in doubt, ask the marshals whether you are allowed to ride here. Total contrast. We have now arrived in a moor. Lammermoor is a landscape of bare and beautiful hills. The Lammermoor Hills, also known simply as the Lammermoors. The name Lammermoor literally means bog of lambs. The hills extend over several counties and the slopes are richly grazed by sheep. These hills are only crossed by one main road, which is often closed in winter due to snow. The Lammermoors themselves used to be densely forested, but the face of the area changed due to the influence of man. Where there used to be oak and birch trees and probably bears, moose and wolves, man cultivated and cleared the forest in the familiar way. Sheep farming was intensified up to the higher altitudes and, not least as a result, one of Scotland's typical moor and heathland landscapes was created. Lammermoors were occasionally the scene of battles between the English and Scots. The farmers sought their fortune on the high ground and established their sheep pastures there. This worked well until the 14th century, but by then the winters had become too cold and many of the farms, known here as shields or shielings, were abandoned. Basically, what remained was a more or less sparsely populated region. Today, larger villages tend to be located at the foothills of the Lammermoors. There could hardly be a more dramatic change than the one between the deserted moors and the bustling city of Edinburgh. By now, it's late afternoon and we've arrived at our small hotel in the Abbey Hill neighborhood. After unpacking, we walked towards Calton Hill in search of a restaurant. Everything was right on our doorstep, so to speak. Leith Walk is one of the longest streets in Edinburgh and is very popular with tourists due to its mix of shops, restaurants, cafes and pubs. We can't offer you a travel guide to Edinburgh, but we have linked a good video about the Scottish capital above. Here you can see Calton Hill, which is home to many monuments. We walked towards the Omni Centre, an entertainment and leisure complex at the end of Leith Walk. Just before there is the Edinburgh Playhouse, once Scotland's largest cinema and now an events venue. Our second day in Scotland ends with these pictures. If you liked the video, give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel and look forward to day 3 of our Scotland tour with us.